founder and chief executive of Nuclear. Just to set the scene a little bit, hello Stefano. Just to set the scene a little bit before we start our discussion, nuclear power continues to stir controversy. Some are seeing nuclear power as unacceptably risky. Others view it as a key low-carbon energy source. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has led to more European countries looking at adopting nuclear energy for energy security. And of course the need to transition to low-carbon energy coupled with the urgency to achieve energy independence has massively renewed interest. So this is sort of the few kind of bullet points ahead of our discussion. So I'll start with a very generic question. So what role do you reckon nuclear power can play, and could it be part of a sort of global coordinated response in the current energy crisis? So, Rafael,
thank you very much.
The floor is yours.
Pleasure to be here with you, with Minister Stefano. Certainly, nuclear has a role, is already having a role. We're not talking about something which may or might be or maybe less or. The reality is that since we are in Europe, let's be reminded of the fact that not less than 25% of the energy that we have here comes from nuclear, that half of the clean energy in Europe is from nuclear source, and the percentages go on and on like this. It is widely recognized that it is, of course, based on scientific fact that it is CO2 almost free source of energy, so absolutely relevant in the current context of climate change, global warming. It is also interesting to see, and maybe we can develop that later on in the debate, that there is growing interest in Europe. The minister may be telling us something about that. Consolidated users of nuclear are going for more, not only here, but in other parts of the world. In China, in India, in South Africa, in Turkey, in Egypt, in the United Arab Emirates. In many places, we see nuclear being considered as an interesting element in this family of or battery of efforts that we have to have a normal reconciliation of economic growth, sufficiently powered, and care for the environment. Nuclear is not maybe for all. We are not proposing this as a panacea. What we see is that is a very useful, efficient source of energy, which is increasing, contrary to some conventional wisdom out there, is increasing all over the world. And the role of the IAEA is not a commercial role. We are there to ensure that nuclear energy is used and utilized in a safe, secure, and non-proliferation prone manner. So it is a very interesting moment. I like to describe it a bit as a return to realism, in the sense that people are seeing that for those who have it, it is an incredibly useful asset. For those who do not have it, it might be a very interesting prospect for the future.
But how key is it for Europe to give a green label to nuclear energy? I mean, will nuclear pick up without the green label anyway? Or
it would be very difficult, of course, because as any industrial activity, you need to have a level playing field. You need to have certain financial conditions and financing instruments to use. And when such an important global economic bloc like the EU takes decisions on the basis of certain criteria, when you have a source of energy like nuclear that was risking being left out of that, that would have had an impact. Luckily, I think that there was a deliberation, there was a discussion, and mind you, the issue was so debated, as you were saying in the introduction, that the European institutions decided to send the issue to the JRC, so not to get you lost in acronyms, which is a group of wise men and women, top scientists in Europe that looked into the matter to come to the conclusion that, of course, there is nothing to say that nuclear would be environmentally worse than any other source, much better, in fact, than any other source of energy. So this is providing for a way forward in having nuclear somehow integrated into this, which I'm sure is going to be very, very important.
Anna, we've been chatting before the start of the session, and it does look like Poland is really pressing ahead with a lot of projects, regardless of whether it's labeled green or not green. I mean, you're doing a lot in Poland, are you, at the moment?
Yeah, we've got a kind of era of energy in Poland, and one of our priorities is nuclear. So we thank very much the agency for the consent and the consequent support. For the first time in our history, we are very consequent and decisive about the nuclear power plant project. We've already presented the environmental documents, which will give us a chance to get soon the environmental decision, which is always quite difficult as a milestone in the whole process, which means that by 2026 we will manage to start the construction process. We checked last year the social support for nuclear, because it's always an issue in terms of environmental topics, in terms of security and safety. And I was also very surprised, because 74% of our people support nuclear, which is enormous.
Why do you think it's happening?
I think that now, if we would check it, it will be even more, because of the whole situation, because it's safety, it's security, and it's independence. And for us, when it comes to energy policy, it's the absolute priority, but I think that it's also for Europe now. If Europe needs to choose between Russian gas and nuclear, the answer seems to be quite obvious. Like Belgium has already made up this decision, and they came back to nuclear. Resigning from Russian gas, they decided, and the Green Energy Minister decided to prolong the reactors for 10 years. I believe that a few months ago nobody would even imagine such a situation, that green energy in Belgium decides about nuclear, but social support for her was higher than before this decision. So we see that security and safety becomes a priority for Europe, and this is all about nuclear, safety and security.
And who's going to build those?
We need to choose the technology. Last year we decided about the location. We are in dialogue with Americans, with Koreans, and with French. So this year, this is the final deadline for us to choose the technology, because apart from the whole permitting process, we need to prepare the design and the final concept, and without having the technology. So again...
Are you ruling out China as one of the builders?
We don't have a dialogue with China. Now we think about a very safe and secure project. We want to be on...
Why not? Why are you not talking to China?
We decided for US, for French partners, and for Korea to continue the dialogue. We also think about the local content, which is very important in this issue, but in every energy project. Of course, with local content, with nuclear projects, it's always a challenge, but we put a lot of emphasis on local content issues, but also environmental issues. So we would like to have partners which have experience with proceeding, implementing this investment from the very beginning till the end, with safety, security, but also taking into account environmental measures. We need to remember that we are in the frame of European directives, including environmental ones. We have also very strict national procedures. I'm responsible also for environment, which is a kind of phenomenon among European countries, because we've got energy, climate, and energy and environment in one ministry. which makes the whole investment process more reasonable when it comes to environmental processes. But also we don't have this internal fight between the ministries about what is more important, investing or protecting the environment, since we can find an easy balance, easy dialogue in one institution.
Stefano, I would like to ask you on the same subject. When we think about like the basic public vision of nuclear energy, people believe, rightly or wrongly, that it's extremely costly, that it's very safe until it becomes very unsafe, and that the majority of supply, 42%, comes from Kazakhstan.
Yes.
So what are the sort of misconceptions that the most misunderstood things about nuclear power that you can talk about and maybe share a few thoughts with us?
Maybe the more misunderstood is the safety concern. Nuclear power is really a safe way of producing energy. That's clear. And I can say that the future generation of nuclear power is even safer than what has been the past. I think the International Atomic Energy Agency has made a lot of effort in coordinating research on what's called fourth generation of nuclear reactors, and to implement concepts that were not present in the old reactors, that is passive safety. So the possibility that the nuclear reactor can stop by itself, by the physics, not by the human intervention. So these kind of concepts are very important. There has been a problem on cost, actually. You have to think that the nuclear has been developed like 35 years ago. So we lived in a different world. And nuclear, to be competitive with oil and gas, the price of $10, $12 in the 90s, tried to make nuclear reactor bigger to count on the scale effect in order to reduce the cost of the energy. Actually, it happened the contrary. So going big increased the cost of the reactors. This is understood, and all of the world now, the community is going to small modular reactors. So a size that is smaller than the one of the big projects that are doing, one can build now, and allows for cost reduction because of a concept that the parts of this reactor don't need to be manufactured on site because they are small. They can be manufactured in different factories and being only assembled together. So this concept of SMR is the one many companies are working on to really reduce the cost of nuclear. And of course, there are also other concepts that can be very useful to reduce the cost of nuclear. Eliminating, reducing the risk with the concept of the passive safety can reduce the dimension of modern SMR, for example. Our design is 1/4 of in size with the same energy production than the old Superphénix design, and can be even half of the price of a current PWR. So just for the reduction and optimization of the design. So there are a lot of things that the new generation of nuclear reactor can bring in order to reduce the cost. But the most important is also the possibility not to depend on the fuel. So you mentioned in your question the fact that 42% of uranium is coming from Kazakhstan. But the other resources are a little bit more diffused. And what is important to know is that we have a lot of waste today that can be used as a fuel. So if we come back again into the history, the French reactors have suggested the idea of using MOX. That is a mix of essentially nuclear waste. So the depleted uranium from the process of enrichment of the current industry, and the plutonium that is actually a very bad waste.
That sounds really like a breakthrough that you can use old fuel. But let me challenge you. I know you are.
This is giving you energy independence. And a country like UK can count on this fuel for hundreds of years without importing anything from outside, without mining anything.
That seems incredible, but let me challenge you a little bit on this, because I live in the UK, and I know the UK went for the idea of small reactors, but like there are two issues here that have they been really thought through. One is that I can't see people in Surrey voting for having a nuclear reactor, a small nuclear reactor in their garden. I mean, what's about public approval of small reactor? And second, what about security? I mean, is protecting a small nuclear reactor from all sorts of things is more difficult than a big reactor?
Yes, well, at the moment we don't see the idea of putting a small reactor in the towns, for example. In UK there are a lot of lands that has been already approved, so the population also agreed on the fact that to put reactors, and these lands can be used for deploying also small modular reactors. You can deploy a fleet, you can deploy 3 or 4 altogether. Maybe in stages, so it can be the cost of capital can be even less, because one thing is spending 27 billion in one shot to make a big reactor. Another thing is building one after the other with 1 billion each. So the cost of capital becomes very low, and you can start earning money from the electricity you produce from the first one. So it's a completely different approach. So once these reactors will be shown to be safe and will provide energy at a cost which will be lower, then I think the population will accept more and more the fact of having these machines very close. But think about a small modular reactors is a device that is 6 meters of diameters and 6 meters high and produces 200 megawatt thermal. It's really a small thing.
Let me bring Rafael and Anna into the discussion. Any sort of anything?
SMRs, of course. What Stefano is saying is true. There is a lot of excitement about this. SMRs have been discussed for many, many years. The difference now is that we are seeing this happening. I come just now from another table where somebody said or peddled again a formula that these reactors are fantastic. The only problem is that they do not exist. And I counter that argument, which is a very witty argument, but that does no longer correspond with reality. There are some SMRs already in existence. There are some that are being developed. Of course, my take is not a commercial one, but the description that you have just heard is correct. When you talk about the security aspects, the non-proliferation aspects, all these things, then I raise my hand, and this is what we are here for. Not anything can be put in the market. Reactors need to be pre-licensed, they need to be licensed, they need to be safeguarded, and they need to be inspected so that they are operating. It's not that they are out in the wild and you have a reactor and you wonder, well, very nice, but what will happen if nuclear material is lost all of a sudden? So I think it's important debates like this in the sense that we remind and inform people that nuclear industry is perhaps the more regulated industry that there is. So that there is an international body like the IEA and also the national regulators that tend to be very strict, and you will have your own independent regulator, and from the executive you are going to be saying things, and I'm sure they will be challenging those and asking for certain clarifications or requests in accordance with what? With the international safety standards and security guidance that we all agree at the IEA. So the SMR thing is one that has enormous promise. And let me say from my perspective that hardly a week passes without me receiving in my office in Vienna a Minister of Energy of a developing country. African countries, Central American countries, and others, some in Eastern Europe as well, not qualifying as developing, but some smaller economies coming and saying, well, it's like a different sort of Me Too. We want that. How is that? What you were saying. So is it true that for having nuclear energy, I no longer need to think about 9 billion or 8 billion, and for perhaps even in the range of hundreds of million, there is a possibility? Yes. So I think we have to get it right. The IEA is very actively involved in working with regulators, with industry, to facilitate a successful rollout of these reactors.
Let me perhaps try to bring the audience into discussion, and I see we have a few questions there. Please, yeah.
If you can permit me, Ishan Tharoor of the Washington Post. Mr. Grossi, could you give us an update on the situation as you see it in Iran right now, and the trajectory of Iranian nuclear developments, and perhaps tell us what you hope for in the next round of negotiations?
May I, Dimitri, since it's a bit of the issue, but a very topical.
Yeah, it's a very topical question.
Is of great interest, and it has to do with nuclear energy and motivations and why people.
Totally.
So, as you know, there are two things ongoing at the moment, which are parallel and interconnected. One is the attempts to revive the JCPOA. This has been a long process, ongoing for more than a year, which at the moment seems to be going through a great deal of difficulty because of things that have perhaps not much to do with nuclear matters. I think the nuclear aspects of the agreement are pretty much finalized, but still there are doubts. The issue there is what happens if we have to confront a reality where the agreement will not be there. And I have been reporting to the world about the developments around the nuclear program of Iran, which is a very big, very ambitious program, a program that is getting into enrichment at weapon or close to weapon grade levels, that is undergoing research of issues that are strictly forbidden, for example, in the JCPOA, like uranium metal, or developing new and more efficient types of centrifuges. And when you do this, it's because you want to enrich more material when you have just one nuclear reactor in operation. So this poses an enormous amount of questions out there. And on top of this, we have been working with Iran on a number of issues that have not been clarified with them. We found traces of uranium in places that no uranium should be there. So we have been trying, to put it in very simple terms, we have been trying to ask our Iranian counterparts, if we found this, where is the material? What was going on here, since you never declared that here, where you can see a farm or a parking lot, what was happening here? We are always going to discover what was going on, always. The technology allows you to do that. So we have been, and we are, I would say, technically speaking, we are still in the process of trying to get answers to these questions. It's complex. I suppose, I should abstain from having a final conclusion at this point, since we haven't finished the process yet, but let me say that we are at a very difficult juncture at the moment, and I hope that the time that mediates between now and the issuance of my report will be put to good use to come at least with the start of a credible answer to these things.
Thank you, Rafael. We have a next question here.
Thank you. Sean Trainer. I'm really heartened but deeply saddened by this conversation at the same time, because this conversation was being had 30 years ago and it's not changed. We're hearing all these things about non-proliferation, public acceptance, safety, economics. But surely the elephant in the room is one of investment and governments taking long-term integrated energy strategies at heart. And rather than everyone coming out and pitching their own source. We hear it from the oil people saying we've not invested enough in hydrocarbons, which is right. We've not invested enough in alternative sources, which is right. We've not invested enough in nuclear, which is right. Is there an option for everyone to get their heads together and try and sort this mess out once and for all?
Well, I think, if I may, Dimitri,
of course.
I think you shouldn't be so frustrated, at least, perhaps not completely optimistic, but there's movement. It's not like you are saying, and I would share in some of that frustration that we've been listening to this circular discussion. France is going for more nuclear, the UK is going for more nuclear, Poland is going for new nuclear, Egypt is going for, not only going, they are already there, Turkey is doing the same, the United Arab Emirates has gone for it in a very successful way. So it is not that we are talking about a possibility which is tantalizingly close, but we never get there. Why is it so? I think this has changed. The reality, the market is showing. The thing that where I believe your question is still valid is in the sense that are we tapping into this opportunity to the extent we could? And we are not. And this is my impression. Hence, the debate about the taxonomy and how difficult it was for many countries like Poland that were saying we believe that it is a legitimate option for us. It should be a legitimate option for us to do this. And it was such a politicized debate that even scientific facts were being hidden. So it has been an uphill struggle, but I think that this is why I used this expression at the beginning of the round table. I see a return to realism, and I was referring to Belgium. I was yesterday in Brussels and with Prime Minister De Croo, and they have decided to put the brakes on the nuclear phase out, which is going to proceed, but not so much, because they see that the figures simply do not add if they take out all the reactors from the grid. So I would say some things are changing, but it's of course something that from the IAEA we do not decide. It's up for member states and the market to see how it goes.
Anna, would you like to add anything? You seem to be
I have to say I'm not
choosing actions
but I'm very enthusiastic about the project, because in our case, for the first time, we are that progressed. For the first time, we've got documents, location, and so on. But yeah, when I look at the whole history in Poland of nuclear, I may assume that some people who were there at the very beginning, like 20 years ago, and they are still not in the same point, but not much advanced as they would like to. I share your frustration in terms of the whole progress of nuclear in the world. But when I look at the project from my perspective now, I'm very enthusiastic and very optimistic, since I told for the first time we are quite serious about it, and we've got it in our energy strategy, and we've got social acceptance, because I have to admit that it was one of the main concerns in Poland. As you know, we are very close to Chernobyl, and there were many stories around. So, and also it includes micro technologies and small technologies. We are quite ambitious about it, but also companies. And referring to security question, I was driving along Poland 1 week ago, and I looked. There are many households in villages with LPG own storage. I think many of you know how it looks like next to the household. There is a storage. I don't know how many liters it contains, but next to it, people are playing, eating dinner. And it's very dangerous as well. But it's just a question how it's used, how it's maintained, and how it was installed. So every energy source brings us a kind of question of being danger. And I came to nuclear from offshore, and I was very surprised how many regulations we've got, how many organizations deal with it. And this is such a complex structure, so many certification processes, and it's so complicated that I believe that also this bureaucracy which is hidden behind, maybe it's too much, I don't know, it's hard to assess, but for sure it gives us also a lot of security and safety.
Stefano, we have 1 minute to sort of conclude our discussion. So would you like to add anything to the debate?
Yes, maybe. I lived the same frustration. I experienced the same frustration for 30 years. Not the possibility that nuclear couldn't express the real potential of the technology. And actually, I can testify that the time has really changed. Started from COP26 with the need of decarbonization. And so the fact that nuclear can play a real strong role in that. And then the energy prices in November, the rise of the energy prices caused also an increasing interest in nuclear. And then also, of course, the problem of the energy independence, because nuclear can also solve this problem. So there are three elements that make nuclear very attractive. And I can testify this because I'm raising money in a company for nuclear, and I raised 400 million without doing anything in a few months. So even the public, the community of people that interact with me are so interested in this new technology that is really happening. So you will see something happening really in the next few years.
Well, Rafael and Stefano, thank you very much for the discussion. If I were to summarize it, it does seem to me like we're clearly seeing a revival of interest in nuclear energy, given energy security issues and the spike in energy prices across the world. But issues and questions remain, so more will be rebuilt. Thank you very much for.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.